In today's video, we are going to play some Our Fantasy Bingo. I've been taking part in the Our Fantasy Bingo since it came out in April, and this is my second year trying to fill the board. Last year I succeeded, but I didn't manage expert mode, and that's probably what I'm aiming for again this year. So my concept for this, because I love a pun, is Our Fantasy Bingo. I know nothing about actual games of bingo. I should make that very, very clear. The whole thing of having to shout out in a room full of people, of having to be confident that you've not misheard something, it's not for me. But it looks fun, and I love their little catchphrases, like the two fat ladies for 88 and all that kind of thing. Apparently, there are two different types of kind of bingo sets. There's 75 and 90. The Our Fantasy Bingo board obviously is 25 squares. So I went through and numbered each of the squares 3 times. What I'm going to do is find a random bingo caller online, and I will kind of call numbers as if it's a game of bingo. Each time I hit one of the squares that I have already read for, that'll just get a star. And every time I read that book that I haven't read for, I will have to read a book that fills that prompt. My goal by the end of the video is to have filled a row, a column, a line, whatever we call it, which, as far as I'm aware, is getting a bingo. If it doesn't work, if we go for, say, more than 4 or 5 books before I actually get, then, you know, we're just going to call it quits. So my hope is that the numbers will just work for me, and if they don't, it'll have been a fun game. And either way, it's going to help me fill up that board. I do already have a TBR video that I will link to in the description below, so I already have a rough idea for each of the prompts. It might be different now because either new books have come out or I've heard of new books and I just fancy something different, but there's nothing where I have a square and I don't at least have a loose idea. So we should be good to go no matter how the numbers land. So here, as you can see, is my absolutely, I am sure you will agree, stunningly edited Our Fantasy Bingo board. The numbers are in red. If we get multiple hits on the same square, we're just going to discard those. I'm not going to be reading multiple prompts for the same thing. So here we have the random bingo caller that I've picked, and I have set it. Oh, I haven't. I have now set it.
All the steps, 39.
The 39 steps. Okay, so number 39 is to read a book published in 2005. And I actually haven't read this one yet. I have read some books published in 2005, but I haven't read one that I've put down for this square yet. So I'm gonna count it. The book that I had a couple on my TBR for this one. I had Tarnished, I had Lightfall, I think I had A Treachery of Swans, because that's my most anticipated, and I think that's the one I was gonna go with, was A Treachery of Swans, because it's the most anticipated book on my TBR this year, or was. But I already have a copy of Lightfall, so I think we're gonna put Lightfall on the TBR. So that nicely falls right in the middle of the board. I don't know if that gives us more options than anywhere else, but it feels like it does. And I'm going to be reading Lightfall by Ed Crocker. This is, I've been told, a really interesting, unique take on vampires and werewolves. For our next spin, or our next call, we are going to...
Winnie the Pooh, 42.
I don't know why Winnie the Pooh is 42, but I like it. And that gives us 42 is right next door, and it is an author of colour. I actually have already read my book for that one this year. I have read House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. It was a sapphic vampire gothic horror that felt a little bit to me like a YA Rebecca. So we can call again. And we have
Duck and Dive, 25.
Okay. Duck and Dive 25. And that will give us the last in a series. And that's another one I've actually already done this year. during Magical Readathon, so in April, all 5 of the Tiffany Aching books in the Discworld series. That ended with The Shepherd's Crown. I've been putting it off, partly because I haven't read the rest of the Tiffany Aching books, and partly because I've been really intimidated about reading the last Terry Pratchett book, because it's the last Terry Pratchett book. So we can call again, and we have
Saving Grace 68.
it's another one that I cannot for the life of me figure out what the logic of the link is, but 68 puts unattached to anything we currently have. That's disappointing. 60 is a generic title, so that was to pick something that had, you know, blood, throne. I can't think of any words right now, but kind of generic, really kind of YA fantasy, romantasy type titles, a core of X and Y type of thing. So as my potentials, I had put the Scarlet Throne by M.A. Lowe or One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I think I'm gonna go with One Dark Window for this one. This might be a bad choice. I want to say they're mixed reviews, but they're not even mixed reviews, they're amazingly polarised reviews about this one. I think it's about a girl and a monster that lives in her head. So the TBR currently has 2 books on it, and we probably need at least another 3 stars to fill any one of the bingos. So getting another couple that we already have would be really nice.
Gateway to Heaven 27.
Oh, that one's quite kind of on the nose. So 27 is... Oh, 27 is one we've already got. 27 would have been the last in the series again. So we'll just ignore it. No perk, but no punishment either.
Knock on the door 64.
Did we already have that? No, we haven't. 64 was a cozy sci-fi fantasy, which is a genre I love and I am excited to read. So I'm gonna pick to Yield Under Great Pressure. As far as I know, it is a romantasy in a kind of cozy, agriculturally village type of thing. I have utterly adored Alexandra Rowland's books in the past, so that's going to be the 3rd book on the TBR.
Unlucky for some. 13.
Probably going to be unlucky for us, to be honest. 13. Down with the System. And actually that is one I have already read, so go us. We don't actually have to add that to the list. I read Hench for that one. It's about a woman. She's very much a data analyst, and she is hired for a supervillain and makes it her life's work to bring down the superhero classes in their world by methodically ruining their lives in small ways. So the next book,
Danny LaRue 72.
I don't know who Danny LaRue is. I hope he's having a good day. 72, he has though screwed me over because it is not one of the ones I wanted. 72 is to read Not a Book, which again, not what I wanted, but no negative either, because one, I wouldn't be putting something like that on this vlog anyway. The point is to pick books, but also I have done this one. I watched season 1 and 2 of Severance. I don't really get the hype, but I have watched them. So that is another one that is done and gives a potential. Now we could, if there's 2 different bingos we could get, really what I want then is to recycle a bingo square because it would do for both of them. But we'll see. So in the 60s would be nice.
Baker's Bun 61.
Oh, you better not have lied to me. Perfect. So 61 is recycle a bingo square, and that there gives me the option to potentially, the next one might be the last one. Recycle a bingo square. I think I said I was going to do mundane jobs as my recycled bingo square. So that was, I think it was from, I want to say 2003. And the concept was things like, I guess, probably inspired by Legends and Lattes, that it was to be things that weren't fantasy jobs, but in fantasy settings. So, kind of coffee shop owners and bookstore owners and that sort of thing. And the two books that I had kind of pre given myself for that were Coffee Shops in an Alternate Universe by C.B. Lee and Of Books and Paper Dragons by Vaela, Denarr and Micah, Iannandrea. I'm going to go with of Bookshops and Paper Dragons. And I don't know anything about that other than I assume it's a fantasy bookshop. So I'm hoping this will be the last spin. If we get 49, 50 or 51, then this is the last spin. Oh, or 73, 74 or 75. Yes, any of those six would be ideal. We'll see.
One score. Number 20.
So, I mean, that's not what I wanted. But might not be awful. 20 is a book in parts, which I have already read. I read the Wicked prequel novel, Elfie. I read Elfie by Gregory Maguire for that. It was kind of broken into four parts that kind of told different instances in Elphaba's childhood. We still really want those kind of 60s and 70s.
On the sky. 75.
So 75 is the last square on the board, and that square was pirates. And I have already read this one as well. I read The Vengeance as the Weird and Wonder, one of the group books during Weird and Wonder. It was not a success. It pitched itself as vampires meets pirates, and it very much did neither. And it had possibly the world's most annoying protagonist. It wasn't a winner for me personally, shall we say. But it has redeemed itself because it has helped me out here massively. And that is me. I've got a bingo all along the bottom. So my TBR for this week then is Paper Dragons, Bookshops and Paper Dragons, To Yield Under Great Pressure, One Dark Window, and Lightfall. So that would give us 4 books. So I will read each of the books and I will check in with you as I go along. I wanted to start my bingo with, and I actually did try a chapter from Lightfall, but I didn't love the audio and I think I'm going to have to read it in physical copy, which is fine. But I'm not in the mood for that right now. So instead, the book that I've picked up to start my bingo with is Yield Under Great Persuasion by Alexandra Rowland. This is a kind of cozy fantasy romance that follows our main character Tam and Lord Lyford. They have lived together in this village since they were children. They've had, in Tam's mind, there's a kind of rivalry. He's very reluctant. He doesn't like Lyford. He thinks he's boorish. He still holds a grudge over Lyford destroying his prize-winning marrow at a contest when they were 9. They have also been sleeping together since they were 15, but Tam holds a grudge every single time he gives in and lets this happen. At the start of the book, the two of them are forced to spend time together at the village's annual festival to the kind of harvest god. They are put in charge of the matchmaking tent and it forces them to talk to each other. Then Tam finds out that Lyford is actually the kind of a chosen one of this god. He's particularly blessed by this god. And Tam feels especially betrayed because this is the god that he grew that marrow for. And no one's ever apologised to him for the fact that all his hard work came to nothing and nobody comforted him. He decides to run away, and on the road he meets Angrat, who is the harvest god. She makes him see how ridiculous he's been. She makes him see all the ways in which he's been mistreating the people around him, all the ways in which he's been hiding from life. He goes back to the town, and the point where I'm at, he and Lyford have just been having a long chat about their life to this point, their relationship, how they've both had these misunderstandings, they've wanted different things, but they've not told each other what they wanted. and they want you to start again, to find the truth about each other, because they've only ever really understood each other through these masks they wear. In a quest for redemption for the way he's behaved, Tam asks Lyford to give him a series of tasks. And the first one that Lyford has set is that Tam has to grow again the biggest marrow he can as a gift or an offering for the Harvest Goddess. This sort of sets up our theme, I think, of the book, which is going to be things about second chances and finding your place. There's not really been a lot of plot so far, or the plot that there is very low stakes. This is definitely a kind of cozy romance so far, but it's also not the most flowery romantic romance. It's a kind of slow burn every day. It's people getting on with their lives. It's the romance that exists in the small moments rather than in grand gestures. And I really, really enjoy that. I think Rowland's writing just feels really real. The characters, especially Tam, is bitter and resentful, but you can also see the hurt in him. And through his eyes, we see Lyford, who he reads all of his gestures, all of his flirting, to be malicious, to be slightly mocking. But as the reader, we can see that Lyford is trying. In a lot of ways, he's pulling pigtails, he's trying to get reaction. He genuinely is a cinnamon bun golden retriever, and he's being massively mistreated and misjudged by Tam throughout the book. And I'm really hoping these two are going to get their act together, and I'm really hoping that we're going to see them really learn to appreciate each other as the story goes on. Okay, so we are at the end of Yield Under Great Persuasion. Keep forgetting that title. This is the fourth book I've read by Alexandra Rowland. I didn't feel the need to do a kind of midpoint update on this one because it's very, very low plot. So I don't feel there was much to update you on that wouldn't just be giving away the entire book. It is a very, very low stakes, cozy romantasy, which kind of gives you those lazy summer days vibes. There's lots of gardening in this, there's lots of small town events. There is a brief section where Tam goes off on a quest, but it's all got that very rural, very agricultural, very close community feel to it. And the major plot points are more about finding yourself, about overcoming maybe past assumptions about other people, giving yourself and others second chances, being gentle with yourself, all those sorts of things. I love the characters in this one. I love Tam, who is, as the book calls him constantly, a goblin. He is grumpy, he is bitter, but he's also been hurt so much in the past that you can't help but really hope that he's gonna pull through. Then you have Nicolau, Lord Lyford. He's a puppy dog, he's adorable. You're briefly set up to think maybe he's quite arrogant, but that is just entirely Tam's point of view of him, seeing him as kind of arrogant and aloof. Once we get to know him more, we see a much softer side of him. We see how he's been trying desperately all these years. The world is really interesting. You have 7 different gods, and everyone kind of pledges himself primarily to one and then to maybe kind of another secondary one. They tend to maybe take to do with more of that god sphere. So both our boys here are favoured of Angarad, the goddess of the harvest. She's the goddess of abundance and of the domestic sphere and coziness, and that's very much what this book obviously is. One thing I think really has been really interesting about reading Rowland's books is how broad a swath of different tones she manages to write. This one, I would say, sits somewhere between her two kind of most popular ones. The marrow growing in this, the quests, the annoyances to lovers romance really reminded me of Running Close to the Wind, but it doesn't have quite the same level of kind of frantic energy that Running Close to the Wind has in terms of kind of pacing and general vibe. I would say it's closer to A Taste of Blood and Iron, but it doesn't have that seriousness to it. It doesn't have that high level politics. It just sits somewhere nicely in between the two and adds that really, as I said, kind of rural, agricultural, slower way of life type of vibe. This was a 5-star read for me, and I read most of it in an afternoon. So coming off that really cozy romantasy, I'm going to read, I guess, what I think of as one of the very first staples of the romantasy genre I saw when Romantasy kicked off. And that is One Dark Window. This has been on my radar for a long time. It's been on my shelf for a long time. You can see here the sticker that I've tried to take off, but I'm a bit scared because it looks like it's going to make a mess of the cover. I actually got this at an airport lounge when I was coming back from Oslo, and I still haven't read it. So I think this is one of the books that really set the kind of style, the tone of what we're currently calling Romantasy, and I'm really interested to read it. From what I understand, though, it is slightly more maybe gothic, maybe more paranormal than most Romantasies. And I think the gothic aspect probably is going to be my way into that. I do understand that obviously there is the romance happening, but where I'm really interested is in seeing the nightmare and the way that he inhabits Elspeth's mind. I think is going to be really interesting. For that 2025 release spot, I picked Nightfall by Ed Crocker. And it hasn't went brilliantly well. I am sitting at about 50 pages of this book, and I'm not loving it. The world is a sort of fantasy dystopian. We are in a world where humans don't exist. We have vampires, werewolves, and sorcerers. And in kind of recent past, the biggest vampire city has fallen, and we are now back in one of their original strongholds. There are lots of warring factions all trying to usurp power. They're playing off each other. And honestly, it's not holding my interest the way I would hope it would. We have a lot of different POVs, and some of them, of course, are more interesting than others. But I just haven't found one that really draws me in. I think part of my problem with it is that the world building is so vast that Crocker is getting us settled in this world. He's explaining the world building, he's explaining the different political conflicts, he's explaining the history. And because he's doing that through different characters, so we're switching POVs, I kind of feel like we're not getting enough on the characters themselves. So far, it feels very flat, kind of one-dimensional. We do have one character very much set up as the lead, Sam. She's a maid in the palace, and she's one of the kind of lower tier of vampires. There are the High Lords, there are the kind of nobility, and there are what are called the Worn. The Worn are the kind of servant class, and they don't get the best blood. That means that they age, they don't live forever, and they don't have the same level of speed or night vision or whatever. She is determined that she is not going to be a Worn forever. She is going to find out the secrets that are in this castle. She is going to get the higher quality blood, and she's going to escape and make a new life for herself. And I am interested in that, but we're just not focusing in on that enough to make up for the moments when we're focusing on things I'm not interested in. I did persevere with it for a little bit longer than I probably would have otherwise, because I need a book with light in the title for my Iannandrea prompt this month, and I don't have anything else on my TBR that fits. So I did try and push through. But honestly, I don't think it's worth me struggling. So I think it would be better if I just soft DNF this for now. I am still slightly intrigued by the world. I'm intrigued by the setup. And I did hear really good things when this was coming out. I actually pre-ordered this copy, so I do want to finish it purely for that reason. I'm not going to unhaul it, but I think a soft DNF and back onto the shelves is in order. If I really, really want to read something with that in the title, then I might reread Theft of Sunlight by Ina Starkanani, because I know that was a 5-star book for me, and it wouldn't hurt me at all to reread it. Other than that, I might just accept that this prompt wasn't for me, and I'm going to miss out. For the bingo, though, I need to replace my 2025 release. And I think the best way to do this would be to go with one of my NetGalley arcs. I am filming this right towards the end of ARC August, and both for the ARC August readathon and for my own kind of pet projects, I've been trying to whittle down my NetGalley TBR a little more forcefully than I usually would this month. So now that I have a gap, it makes sense for me to pick something that contributes to that goal as well as this one. So the book that I've picked from my NetGalley TBR that is coming out this year and is also kind of speculative is Natalie Haynes' No Friend to This House. I've read Natalie Haynes before. I really enjoy her mythology retellings. Having just started this one, I feel like it's probably in the vein of A Thousand Ships, That was a look at the events of the Odyssey, but only through the eyes of the female characters. And it had a very macro level storytelling. We got a broad perspective on all the events, but we didn't delve too deeply into any one character's life or experience. And I think that's what this one is too. This one is going to look at the story of Jason and the Argonauts, and most specifically Medea. Medea is a character that is very much painted as a villain in Greek mythology. Natalie Haynes in this one, I think, is going to maybe try and paint a more rounded picture of her. She's going to maybe look at the different ways you could interpret what we know about these characters in this time. Jason comes from that kind of group of really, really well-known Greek heroes that once you dig a little deeper into mythology, comes across as a bit of a dick. Other people are either relegated to background characters or they suffer, they die, and it's all in furtherance of his journey. And I think it'll be really interesting to look at Medea through that kind of perspective, that how much control has she had in the way that she's written. And I definitely think just even talking about these two books now, I can definitely hear in myself that I'm so much more interested to continue with No Friend in This House than I was with Lightfall. So that's really kind of settled my decision. I think I'm making the right choice to soft DNF that. And I will come back to you and let you know how I got on with this one just before I wrap up the vlog. And that way we can tick off that whole row. So I have a confession. I did start Of Bookshops and Paper Dragons for the prompt was to recycle a prompt from the past year, and I picked mundane jobs. But I've DNF'd that book. It seems like a great book. It's a very cozy, very, very low stakes fantasy, which actually starts with some kind of spaceship stuff. So I want to even maybe say sci fantasy, cozy sci fantasy, which is completely unique. But I think the problem is that I've recently just come off the back of quite a lot of cozy fantasy books for this vlog with Yield Under Great Pressure, but also for some other vlogs and some other books I've just been picking up. And honestly, I wasn't feeling that really slow paced, cozy vibe. So again, it's not a total DNF, it is a soft DNF. I am just gonna put it back on my shelf and I'll get to it when I'm in that cozy mood again. But this being the last square I need to complete this vlog, I really, really did want to get to something. So I had on my look on my shelf for other mundane fantasy jobs, and I had one where I was really interested. And I had one I was really interested in that is only 50 pages, so I went ahead and I read it. This is Structural Integrity by Tabitha O'Connell. It is a queer fantasy romance, basically. Slice of life with a little bit of politics thrown in type of story. Kel, who is a messenger boy, starts up a relationship with a government official called Jan. The book is a dual timeline. We see them then and we see them now. Then is when they're getting together. We see them kind of in the first blush of romance. And now is when the shine has worn off slightly. We're starting to see the differences in their social class, in their jobs, in their personalities coming through. The relationships got a little bit rocky. Jan is very caught up in his work, in his meetings. Kel is feeling like he is being kind of kept. He is feeling like he wants to go out and achieve something. And then he notices that the theatre in the lower district is about to be sold off. He knows how much it has meant to so many people in that community. And he asks Jan to try and find out more about what's happening. It's only 50 pages, so it's very, very short. But I did enjoy it. I really liked the setup of these two characters. I liked the world. And I know there is a sequel called Structural Strain, which looks like it's a little bit longer. I'll probably read that pretty soon because I'll consider these both kind of one book, if I'm honest. But for now, for today, it ticks off my R Fantasy Bingo square that I needed. I have finished No Friend to This House by Natalie Haynes. And this was a fairly safe bet for me. I have enjoyed Natalie Haynes' work before. She writes mythology, specifically Greek mythology retellings, that don't stray too far from the path. She's not doing Greek mythology in the modern day. She's not doing Greek mythology meets sci-fi. She's just telling the story set in kind of ancient times, but usually with a slightly feminist slant. She tends to look specifically at, female characters especially female characters that maybe have been presented as villain or just ignored largely by the narrative, and she kind of creates their own story for them. So this one to me felt like a real combination of two of her previous works and a real book of kind of two parts, not exactly two halves, because I do feel that the first section was bigger, but it's kind of two very distinct parts. The first part I would say is maybe just over a half. Felt very much like the first book I read from her, A Thousand Ships. A Thousand Ships gives us the Odyssey, but told through all of the women involved. And you only get maybe one chapter from each woman. You only get a snippet. We never come back to them. And it's to create a really, really macro version of the story. And I love that book. This does the same thing. We are looking at the women. The premise of the book, or the kind of the core the book is built around, is the voyage of the Argo. Jason and the Argonauts and their journey to find and retrieve the Golden Fleece. But we never really hear from Jason or any of the Argonauts. The way we see their journey is through the women that they encounter, either directly along the way, or the women whose lives are impacted by the actions of Jason and the Argonauts, or by the actions of the gods as they try to help Jason, to smooth his journey, to help him achieve this heroic goal. So we're very much seeing the way women are cast aside, the way women are treated as second-class citizens. They're not important, they're not heroes. They have to suffer if they have to suffer, because Jason, he has to go on to glory. These characters can be big roles, they can be important characters, or they can be relatively minor. Obviously, the character that we're going to talk more about in a minute is Medea. She is the daughter of the king who actually currently owns the Golden Fleece. But we also see more minor characters that have been largely forgotten about. We see the mother of the Golden Ram. She is a human woman who is taken by Poseidon and in his ram form, and she gives birth to this golden ram that becomes the Golden Fleece once he's murdered. So we see the tragedy of her. She's taken from her home, she's raped by a god, and then her child, who, although he's she does say that, although he's an animal, and she understands that it might seem ridiculous because he's an animal, but he's her son, and he is taken away and becomes famous and lauded for what they did to his corpse. And she is left on an island all on her own forever. Her suffering is to create this mythical creature that can then be slain, that can then create the fleece, which can be the point of Jason's journey. Her suffering is, it's not Jason's fault. He has no part in that, but it does show the way that these women are kind of treated and discarded in mythology as just means to an end. They're the collateral damage. They don't matter. And then we go into the second half of the story that is very much Jason and Medea, and we finally get a bit more personality. We finally get a little bit more depth on these characters. And I would say this is the point where I kind of started to actually deeply care about the characters rather than just they were interesting. And this is where you get into the nitty-gritty of their characters. And we see their marriage, how rocky it is. It's not falling apart exactly, but they are such different personalities. They're both smart, they're both bright, they're both able to bounce off each other. Medea especially she's thriving at this point. People are coming to her to talk to her about her medical skills, her way of interpreting visions from the gods. She's building a name for herself. Jason is still riding on the coattails of having been a great adventurer, and he very much resents the attention that Medea is getting. He's very fickle, he's very capricious, his mood changes on a whim, and he can still be totally charming, he still wins her over, she's still utterly devoted to him, and yet she can see how jealous and how temperamental he is. And then the princess of the country that they're in decides that she wants to marry Jason. And Jason very quickly decides that Medea isn't his wife. He accepts that they were married, but he points out that she's a barbarian from another country, so she kind of legally can't be his wife. And the fact that they've been together for years, that they have 2 children, is completely irrelevant. He's going to have her banished out of the country, and he's going to marry the princess. And Medea always understood that they were married. He said they were married. They've lived together as man and wife. They swore oaths beneath the gods, which both of them is a major thing. And yet Jason's willing to throw it all away. And Medea quite rightly feels completely betrayed.
And that's where we then see that kind of descent into well-known Greek story of Medea as the villain, as the witch queen that, kills her family. I would say that first section, the kind of little bits and pieces, took me a lot longer than the second section, which gained momentum from sticking with Medea's POV. We slipped occasionally into other people. We did get a couple of maybe moments from the nurse, from the princess, but we were largely in Medea's point of view. Pace really picked up during that section. But I did enjoy the whole thing. I really liked the idea as well of these women along the journey, and the idea of collateral damage is what kind of kept coming back to me. That whether intentionally or not, whether directly or not, these women are all affected by the need for this man to achieve greatness. I definitely think Haynes has a really readable writing style. I think it's easy to digest, it's easy to blow through these books really quickly. It was definitely the right choice to switch from Lightfall. I still do think I'm gonna keep Lightfall on my shelf. I'm not getting rid of it, but it was the right choice. Which brings us to the last bingo prompt, which was to do a book with a generic word in the title. And the generic word in the title then had a couple of suggestions, things like dark, crown, sword, court, the kind of words that are really popular in romantasy, in YA fantasy. So I had picked One Dark Window because that's the book that I picked when I made my TBR back in April. But you'll never guess what I'm gonna do. I did start it, and I'm not enjoying it. It's not that I'm not DNFing it because I'm not enjoying it, but I hadn't actually realised that obviously when I made the TBR, that was fine, but since then, I'm going to be doing a buddy read of One Dark Window for the Plotluck podcast, and it's not now. So I could read it now and then either reread it near the time, or I could read it now and just hope my memory holds up, but I really don't think it will. So I've decided that since there's nothing in particular tying me to this book, I'm going to DNF One Dark Window, and instead I picked up a short story with sword in the title. This is The Phoenix on the Sword by Robert E. Howard, and obviously the word that was in the kind of generic word lists here is sword. This is a short story that was written and published in 1932, so it's also going to count for my Golden Girls monthly challenge, where I need to read a book that was published before I was born. So it feels like this is the smart thing to do. The Phoenix on the Sword is the first in the Conan series, so like the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I've never seen the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I've seen bits and pieces of it, I think maybe just through, happenstance and it appearing in other things. I've seen, I have the idea of what he looks like in that movie, but I've never seen the movie. So I had no real expectations going in. In this, Conan is the middle-aged king of Aquilonia. He has usurped the previous king, he has taken the throne. And where in the past he was a hero, his people are now starting to see him as a foreign invader. And this is partly because of the bard Ronaldo, who has been turning people against Conan. He's been telling them that they were better off under their previous king, and they're starting to see him not as a liberator, but as a tyrant. Ronaldo, some other warrior types, and a sorcerer called Thoth Amon are kind of put together into this like traveling band by Ascalante, who is the villain of the piece. He wants to take Conan's crown. They all have their own motivation for joining, but we honestly spent a good chunk of the short story just setting up these rebels without ever really getting any personality on them. The entire plot of the story really is that this rebel band, they break into the palace, they attack Conan, we have a big fight. That's it. There really isn't much personality here. It is about 40 pages, 60 pages, depending on what edition you read. So there is not a lot of space for a lot of things to happen. But also it has that thing that a lot of classics do, where personality and character is far less important than world building and plot. This felt very much like the characters were cardboard cutouts that were serving the needs of the story rather than being characters with any real depth to them. Conan probably has the most depth, which makes sense, and I definitely would see myself being interested in having maybe read a version of this story that was longer, a full novel of this story that was made more from his point of view, because I do find that idea that we're coming in after he's liberated the city and he has been their hero and now they're turning against him. I think all of that could be really, really interesting. The politics there. Looking into it, this is the first short story in a collection of short stories that obviously became the kind of Conan mythos. So I'm kind of interested whether would you get more of that if you read more of the short stories, or do we jump into more Conan as an adventurer? Do they go into the kind of the politics of, are they when he is an adventurer or a king? I might be interested in looking up a bit more information. I also might be interested in watching the Conan movie, the original Arnold Schwarzenegger one, just to kind of see the character as he became in pop culture rather than the one I've seen in this book. Because in this book, we're getting a king that he's not just swinging a sword around. He's obviously a fantastic fighter in that finale. So he's not a fighter, but he did seem much more philosophical. He didn't want to have to kill the bard. He makes a point about how in the passage of time he will be forgotten. He's just a king, he's just a warrior, whereas the music, the songs of this bard will live forever. So he really, really doesn't want to have to hurt him. He really doesn't want to have to be his enemy. And I thought that was really kind of unusual and interesting and gave Conan a lot more depth. So it'd be interesting to compare that to the Arnold Schwarzenegger version. Whatever I end up doing with that, it does let me wrap up this vlog, which has went off on some tangents. It has not been what I planned. I think of the 4 books we picked, I've read one, maybe. We read, for a cozy fantasy, we read Yield Under Great Temptation. And then for the recycle a prompt, we went with Mundane Jobs, and I did stick with Mundane Jobs, but we changed from of Books and Paper Dragons to Structural Integrity. And then we changed from Lightfall to No Friend to This House for 2025 release. And then we changed from One Dark Window to The Phoenix on the Sword for the generic title. So yeah, of the 4, we read 1 book that was on the original list. So the vlog has went a bit all over the shop. But I do think that each DNF was the right choice in the moment. Of all the books that I read in this vlog, the Alexandra Rowland was definitely my favourite. That cozy fantasy, very, very, very low stakes romantasy. I do understand that that's not going to be for everyone though. After that, probably No Friend to This House would have been my favourite, just because those were both full-length novels and I feel I got a depth from them that, although I enjoyed the premise of Structural Integrity, it was very short, and then obviously this Conan one was very short as well and didn't have as much character as I like in my books. I have definitely stepped out of my comfort zone by trying the Conan book, and that is the point, I think, of the Our Fantasy Bingo for me. I read a lot of fantasy books. I don't need the motivation to pick up a fantasy book. But what I like about the Our Fantasy Challenge is that it's gonna just encourage me to try new things. I don't want to be thrown massively out of my comfort zone, but I do just want to be nudged, to be encouraged. I can then choose not to and go, let me know if you agree. Did you enjoy this vlog? Did you think it went off the rails? If you have read any of the books that I planned to read or read, then let me know in the comments what you thought of them. I will see you in the next video, and I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.